Hello everyone and welcome to part 3 of a very special 7-part series where we've asked the question, what would the lineup of the greatest ever F1 team look like? From race engineer to team principal, lead driver to chief designer, and the not so coveted number 2 driver spot, we've set out to build an F1 team made up of the best there ever was. Our panel of motorsport experts across Autosport.com, Motorsport.com and GP Racing have all picked individuals throughout history that they believe are or were the greatest of all time. And in this series, we'll be discussing the careers and worthiness of the individuals that have made it into the top 3 for each job role. Now, so far, we've found our race engineer and our chief designer. So today, we're looking for our sporting director. I'm Jess, and to help me find one, I'm joined by James Allen, Jonathan Noble, Stuart Codling, and Luke Smith. So, James, is it fair to say that the role of the sporting director is one of the newer roles that has entered into F1?
Yeah, I would say so. It's something that kind of has evolved from the 90s through the 2000s. It's an absolutely indispensable role in a Formula One team. And essentially what the sporting director does is they are the liaison between the team and the governing body, the FIA. So it's absolutely critical at race weekends. So it's critical that the team is always compliant with all the rules. So the cars are, scrutinized, etc. But when they're racing as well. So it's the sporting director who is on the radio to during the race to the FIA race director. It's the sporting director who goes to any stewards' hearings and makes the case and argues the case for the team. They are also the one who calls out for the pit crew to actually come out onto the apron and make the pit stop after the strategist has taken the decision that this is the right moment. And they're also the ones that tend to oversee the pit stop practice. So if you want to look at them, they're a little bit like a cross between a sergeant major in the army. So they're more than a team manager in that sense, but they're also, it's a lot of the intangibles of racing. It's the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And right now, when we're trying to get the racing restarted again, it's actually the sporting director level that's the ones that get a lot of the work done. How are we going to do this? How are we going to make sure that people social distance in the paddock? All these type of things. It's the sporting director level that's making all that stuff happen.
I think what's fascinating about the role as well is that almost the better job they do, the more anonymous they are. That if things run absolutely perfectly for the team, they shouldn't crop up in any discussion. It's only when things go wrong, if the a rule's broken, if the team doesn't get at the garage in time, if the pit stop goes wrong, or also that we hear more about them. So often when things run like clockwork, the driver's dominant, the praise is going somewhere else. But actually, behind the scenes, they've played a really important role to get to that point.
Absolutely. And maybe unsurprisingly, on our shortlist for our top 3 for this role, we've got 3 sporting directors who have each been involved in the last 3 periods of F1 dominance. So you may have heard their names, but as Jonathan's correctly pointed out, it's the kind of heroes behind the scenes that you're not always aware of. So first up, we're going to Red Bull, and it's a certain Jonathan Wheatley, who oversaw 4 straight championship doubles from 2010 to 2013 and still are regular race winners to this day. And he was one of the team's earliest appointments back in 2006 and has helped turn arguably what was seen as not the most serious of F1 outfits into its 6th most successful team in history. Now, transformation as impressive as the success, could we say?
Well, he's certainly a very impressive individual in a sort of quietly understated way. I met Jonathan for the first time, I think, beginning of the 2010 season, or before the beginning of the 2010 season. I was freelancing at the time, and I was sent by the Red Bull magazine, the Red Bulletin, to go and watch the team being put through this sort of what seemed to be quite a weird set of physical and mental exercises at the National Sports Centre at Bisham Abbey. And Jonathan was there overseeing them. And he explained that it was because refueling had been banned for that season. They'd realised that the time it would take for the wheels to be changed would now be the arbiter of pit stop length. So whereas previously it didn't really matter so much how if you took an extra couple of seconds over a wheel change, because it would be taking 8 or 9 seconds for the fuel to go in. Now all of a sudden we were looking at pit stops of 3 seconds or even below that. So he had sent his entire pit crew down to Bisham Abbey to do this very intense 2-day workshop of physical and mental exercises to sharpen them up in readiness for this new season, this new era without refueling. And just to be embedded in that team at that point was really interesting and exciting, because they were in an incredibly competitive group of individuals, and he was just sort of there orchestrating it and making sure that the testosterone didn't go a little bit out of control. And what was actually even more interesting after that was that they ended up not running that story in the Red Bulletin because they felt that it would give the game away about what they'd been up to prepare for the season.
I blame the writer.
Yeah, it was a load of old rubbish.
But there has been, I think, through this modern era of F1, I mean, we're in a stage where it's all about marginal gains, and that's something that a lot of the great teams have always spoken about. They've always been very, very focused on. And Codders, as you rightly say, like, pit stops are now the big marginal gain that teams can really work on. And when we saw the ban of refueling, pit stops were sort of around the 3-second mark, and it's slowly come down. And Red Bull have always sort of really put such a focus on it and tried to be the gold standard on it. And they won the F1 award for the fastest pit stops over the season for each of the past 2 seasons. And last year they beat the world record for the fastest pit stop 3 times, not just once, 3 times. So that really, I think, is a testament to the operational work that Jonathan has done with the Red Bull team. Because you've got to get those kind of little gains here and there, because they can now be so decisive in Formula One racing.
I mentioned earlier on as well, Luke, that the role they play in that sort of getting things done within Formula One. And Jonathan was one of the people who was very instrumental in the virtual safety car. Obviously, after the tragedy of the Bianchi incident, there was a need to figure out something better. And it was again at that level that they started to workshop that. And that's where the virtual safety car kind of came from. So their role generally, I think, within Formula One, let alone within a Formula One team, but within Formula One itself, I think shouldn't be underestimated.
Absolutely. All great points. So a worthy 3rd position there. So in 2nd place in our list is a key part of the team that displaced Red Bull as the dominant force in F1. And that, as of course, is Mercedes and their sporting director, Ron Meadows. Now, he's been with the team since the BAR days, if we're going way back when. So this isn't someone who parachuted into an already successful team. They've had to build it over time. And that's quite impressive longevity to be with one team in one position for so long, is it not?
I think one of the key things about Mercedes is, and especially what Ron's seen, is the transformation of where teams were kind of in the early 2000s to where they are now. You're talking excess of 1,000 people, and it's been through many transformations from BAR under Craig Pollock all the way through to Toto Wolff. But more recently, there's a strong family spirit there. It's a team where Toto lets people work in areas they excel at, doesn't get too involved, and Ron's been there. He's been loyal throughout it all, and he's seen through it. As I said earlier, the fact that there's been no major calamity on the sporting front, the fact there's been no majors, controversies or disqualifications in the recent era shows the strength that Ron's put in there, and he's got no end of world championships under his belt too, which I think is testament to the job he's doing.
Yeah, just basic stuff like ensuring a car goes to the grid with the right tyres on if there's been a change of climatic conditions. Things that can be overlooked. You need to have that sort of person who is detail oriented but not a micromanager, that ensures that everything happens when it should be.
And I think we saw one of the sort of the epitome of the work that Ron has been doing with Mercedes at last year's Chinese Grand Prix, when they were running 1 and 2, were wary about losing track position through the pit stops, and they come up with the idea to do a double stack pit stop on the same lap. So there was no need for I think it was Valtteri Bottas running 2nd behind Lewis Hamilton at the time to wait behind him. They had the pit stop so finely managed that Lewis was able to come in, pit, tyres change, and Bottas came in literally a second later, and they did the pit stop without losing any time. And that, I think, that was a real, hallmark of just why Mercedes has been so great throughout this era of Formula One. It's ingenuity like that, but it's down to a human level, and that is down to the sporting director at the top of it to really oversee all of that. And I mean, it even goes down to things like a Mercedes factory, how they've got their office space set up. They think about every single detail to make it conducive to good work, positive work, and there's just a strong sort of harmonious vibe always coming out of Brackley, and I think a lot of credit for that has to go to Ron.
He's a great character as well, Ron. I mean, he's a Scouser. He comes from Liverpool like myself, and we're both big fans of Liverpool Football Club. So there's always a few minutes spent during any race weekend when talking about the fortunes of our club, which obviously at the moment are pretty good fortunes. But he's a real passionate sports guy. He goes to a lot of games. He goes to lots of other sports events. And he's also, his son, Michael, is a very, very good driver. He's won the Porsche Super Cup series. I think he races for Audi now. But he makes a good career as a sports car driver. And Ron was very heavily involved as well in karting early days. So he's really worked the whole gamut of racing. You know, he had his own Formula 3000 team when he was very young. He was racing in America in IndyCar. So he's really lived it around racing, and he's got racing in his heart, which I think is something you can really tell from the way he goes about his business.
So we're all singing his praises, but without giving away who we've put in at number one, why isn't he in the top spot then, with all this lovely accolades that we are attributing to him and the success of Mercedes? Why haven't we put him as number one, do you think?
I think because the guy who is number one is the guy who defined the role, really. He's the guy who sort of shaped it into the role that it is today, and had equal amounts of success that Ron's had.
I think that's a very good point. So I will move very swiftly on to who we have in our number one position. And of course, it had to be Stefano Domenicali, known by many as the team principal at Ferrari, but Domenicali was sporting director from 2002 until his promotion, and that was a big spell of Schumacher success. So is it fair to say that we can attribute a lot of that success to him and his role as sporting director?
Yeah, he put a lot of work into ensuring that the whole team was fit for purpose. And back in the day, teams, certainly the operational crew, might not necessarily have been in great physical shape as they could. They weren't necessarily as well drilled as they could be. And it was Stefano in tandem with Nigel Stepney who turned the Ferrari pit crew, for instance, into the phenomenally well-drilled organisation that it was. And you would find Stefano occasionally going for a run round the track after close of play of an evening and bringing people with him to ensure that they were sort of fit enough to be to be working in the pit lane at maximum speed when a car came in. And it was a little bit like watching the mother duck with her little ducklings. And at that time I thought, this is a bit weird, but no, he was just basically redefining the role of what a great pit crew should be.
I think the other thing we need to appreciate about Stefano is dealing with Ferrari politics. It's a very difficult team to try and navigate. You've got many competing interests. You've got the pressure of the Italian nation on you as well. And Stefano, he did have days where he was put under the spotlight. I remember Fuji in 2007 when the race started under the safety car and the FIA sent an email telling drivers they need to start on the full wets, I believe. And there's a bit of controversy because Ferrari claimed they never got that email in time. Kimi was on the wrong tyres, had a pit stop. At the time they were fighting for the World Championship, and they went through the process, and Stefano proved that email didn't arrive in time. But it was the sort of thing, as you saw with Chris Dyer in the early episode, these little incidents can sometimes be used against an individual to come through. And the fact Stefano had this moment in the spotlight, the moment under pressure, and was a month later made effective team principal, I think says a lot about his position.
Yeah, because I think one of the things a sporting director needs to be, and I think they're good sort of trainee team principals in many ways, they need to be a politician. To succeed in Formula One, you need to be strong in the tangibles, which is having enough money to do it, having the cars built, designing the cars, making sure everything runs really, really well. But you also have to be really good at the intangibles, which is the human factor, the sort of working around the rules and all that sort of stuff that happens behind the scenes. And Stefano was I think the guy who kind of defined that really. And there was plenty of examples with Ferrari of going very, very close to the wind and sometimes crossing over the limit. But I think if a lot of Formula One fans would remember seeing him in video, of course, in the 1998 Belgian Grand Prix, where Schumacher had crashed into the back of David Coulthard in the rain and was incensed because he thought that Coulthard had got in his way deliberately to take the win away from him. And he went down to basically rip Coulthard's head off. And I was standing in the pit lane working for ITV, and he walked past, Schumacher went past me, pursued by Stefano wearing his raincoat, like trying to catch up with him just to make sure that he didn't take David Coulthard's head off. And he's the one who's sort of restraining him and trying to bring him back. So even that job of effectively being a bouncer falls under the remit of being a sporting director.
Yeah. I think that the point Johnny raised about the politics is something that we can't really underplay, can it? Particularly in Ferrari, with, like I said earlier, the Italian media hovering over you all the time. Working for Ferrari must be a little bit like being in Game of Thrones, but without the dragons and gratuitous nookie at times, mustn't it? Because there's always someone ready to thrust the knife into your back, wanting to steal your position. And although Stefano, in his position as team principal, did eventually fall foul of the Ferrari politics, to have had that long a career and to have taken that many body blows from things going wrong here and there just goes to show what a great operator he was.
And I guess in that sense, then becoming the team principal shows just how good he was at managing all of that political, both internally and externally. So can we say that is potentially the best kind of nod to a sporting director to then be promoted into that top dog position?
Yeah, I think as James said, you're sort of the team principal in waiting if you're doing a great job like that.
But I think with Stefano, I think when he became the team principal, perhaps not having someone quite as good as he was at that sporting director role was one of the challenges he had. And essentially, it was a super team that Ferrari had prior to that, with Jean Todt, Ross Brawn, Paolo Martinelli, Rory Byrne, Stefano Domenicali, Michael Schumacher. And it was very hard for Stefano to recreate that after they'd all sort of disbanded. It just didn't quite have the people in the right places, and that's why it wasn't the success that the previous era had been.
And the best testament to his brilliance is what he's done for Lamborghini. I mean, since he left Ferrari, went into a job that many were questioning why on earth, would he go and do that role? What qualities has he got for this? And he's done a sensational job. The road car company has been, going through it. Stefano's been linked with new jobs in F1, jobs of team principals, but he's happy where he is right now and doing a fantastic job.
I think that also stretches over to the FIA side as well. His other sort of involvement post Ferrari, looking at sort of the re-runging of the junior ladder, getting Formula 4, Formula 3, Formula 2, and establishing all of that just to make it much clearer as how a junior driver gets from karting to Formula 1. And I think that probably speaks to Stefano's sort of wider impact as well, that he's not just looking at what can I do for, as he was with Ferrari or Lamborghini, but for motorsport as a whole. So I think it's, he's worn so many hats, I think, throughout his many years in this great sport, and he's done an excellent job all around.
If people want to have a listen to Stefano as he is today, as the CEO of Lamborghini and the president of the Single Seat Commission, as Luke says, we did a #ThinkingForward interview with him, which is on the Autosport podcast, so people can go back and have a listen to that, and you can hear the clarity of thought. And he's actually playing his part now in that FIA position that he has. He's playing his part in the reset of motorsport for coming out of this coronavirus crisis. So, as Johnny referenced, he's definitely still very much around the scene, and I wouldn't rule out seeing Stefano in some capacity back in Formula One at some point in the future.
Well, let's hope so. And leading on from that, we actually have a message from the man himself. So let's hear what he thinks about us placing him at number 1.
Hi to everyone, to all motorsport.com readers and viewers. First of all, I hope you are safe and well. I've discovered that I'm part of the legendary F1 team. This makes me very proud and happy. So once again, thank you so much. Be safe and let's get out from these unreal times all together, sharing the passion for the motorsport. Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Ciao.
Brilliant. So our attempt at building F1's greatest team is really starting to take shape now, with almost half of our positions in place. Next up, we've got some really big names as we discuss who will be our technical director. So look out for that episode, and make sure you let us know if you agree with our appointments so far. Have we picked the best of the best, or is there someone we have glaringly missed out? Let us know, and make sure you join us for that next episode and all the next episodes in this series, and we'll catch you next time.